Okay, thank you. Yes. Blame Paulson does. Yeah, I know he does, but not the other one. And I saw, we didn't see the other one. I stopped and I said, no, I said I know last time.
It was on the previous one, I couldn't tell you off the top of my head what it is. Right, that was with the state, right, previous balance of 240.
Oh,
They can't
oh,
recognize
oh,
it.
oh, I got this.
So that's what I couldn't figure out.
He said I saw cemetery.
I was, I thought that was done.
This meeting is called to order. Certification of compliance with open meetings law.
I just walked
Anybody
in.
out there? Roll call.
Cow,
Here.
Miller,
Here.
Bradsett.
Here.
Approve minutes from November 12th and November 13th meetings.
I'll make a motion to approve the minutes from November 12th and 13th.
Second.
It's been moved and seconded to approve the minutes from November 12th and November 13th meetings. Any discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? No. Motion carried. Public comment? Jim Rowley.
Just a question, when the presentation is done for the school referendum, will there be any questions after, or
I
can
think so. It's an
there be?
agenda item. Yeah, I think so.
It doesn't say so, that's why I asked.
I think so.
Okay.
Reports, treasurer.
Account balances, the general fund has $112,547.70. Tax account has $2,058.16. The LGIP general account has $105,477.37. The LGIP fire and EMS has $2.62. Airport has $51,816.02. And the LGI airport has 55 cents. December checks were CenturyLink telephone, $131.74. We Energies for the town hall, $170.65. We Energies for street lights, $53.56. Badger Land Disposal, $16,922.42.
Can I explain that one?
Sure.
Last month it was approved to send 1 month payment, the $8,471. They were going to set it up on an auto pay, but they had a problem with their software, so they deducted $1. I called them back and said, thank you very, very much. Evidently they wanted both payments, last month and this month. That's why the balance is doubled.
Okay. Vendor Levi Town Legal, $156. Northwest Services for Brine and Plowing, $8,106. Daily Jefferson Union for ads for voting, election, and the meeting, $266.09. Statewide Services, tax bond, $165. Heidi's Hobbies for flowers, $40. Jefferson County Clerk, election manual, $4.75. Jefferson County Highway miscellaneous work, $7,645.75. Larry Caw, December salary, $369.40. William May, December salary, $577.19. Peggy Miller, December salary and stamps treasurer, $585.19. Winona Bradsett for partial salary, $1,847.
Second.
It's moved and seconded to approve the treasurer's report. All in favor? Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? No. Motion carried. Emergency management plan. Fire department?
Nothing. James Small called me last week, and I thought we were gonna get a report, but here, I haven't heard from him, so he left me a very nice message. I think they're trying to get their budget together, he is, and he's probably a little overwhelmed.
Airport,
No report.
Blue Spring Lake District,
Nothing.
building inspector,
Nothing.
highway,
Okay, I got, confirmation back from the DNR that we were accepted into their grant program for the ash trees. And I have to get the paperwork signed and sent back by next Monday. I think the brining went well. We had one night when Ron had a board meeting and we had a couple icy roads, so, I had to call Rich and he went out and put salt down. So as long as people call me when there's a problem, I can take care of it. Otherwise, I don't always know what's going on everywhere. It was really strange because that southeast corner of the town got more snow than the rest of it did, and that was the only place it was icy. Naturally on the worst roads to be icy, so. But the brining seems to be working well and I haven't had any complaints about that yet.
that's it. Correspondence,
I have none.
anybody else? Nothing? New business, Scott Hoff, President, Board of Education, Palmyra Eagle Area School District, to present information regarding the operational referendum that they're seeking during the 2019 spring election. Scott?
Thank you. Apologize, I only wrote three. Maybe the fourth one behind. I wanted to just thank you all for your time this evening. My name, again, is Scott Huff, President of the Palmyra Eagle Area School District Board of Education. Steve Boone is with me tonight. He's the superintendent, as is Sharon Ross. She's the business manager. So I just want to give you the abridged version of kind of what we're looking at. The other night's presentation went on for 2.5 hours, so I don't want to commandeer your meeting like that.
That's not gonna work.
That's not gonna work for me. I got one shot at that. My wife wants me home to put kids to bed tonight. So what we're doing and what we'll present tonight is strictly information. We are not here seeking any pro or con. We're not seeking any support or denial of it. Just giving you information because as things would project or as they would go on, we do feel it would have an impact on the towns and villages of the district. So first, the referendum question is a graduating referendum. The first year, $1.75 million for the 2019-2020 school year. So that's that first slide, or the fourth slide on the first page that you see. The second year, it increases by $750,000. The third year, another $750,000. The fourth year, another $750,000. The total number then, $4 million, and that $4 million stays on thereafter until it would be retired by the board. Okay? So, why are we requesting this funding? First off, district revenue, as opposed to municipality or even our home revenue, district revenue is strictly based on revenue limit times the number of district resident students. So we don't have any control on either of those numbers. We can't fix the population in the school district, nor can we control the revenue limit. Those are set by the state. All right? Also, along that same line with the state funding, or with the revenue limit, we also get state aid tied to each enrolled student. We are in a D because our population is declining, so is our state aid. It's all headed down. On the other side, just like you're all running the municipality, some expenses do increase. Even, I know you were just talking about salting and sanding, even things as small as how many times we have to plow and salt and sand has an impact on the budget. This type of referendum, being a recurring referendum, as I said, stays on the books until it would be retired by the board. It's the best way to project out and give some long-term stability to the school district. If the referendum does pass, educating students in the Palmyra Eagle Area School District with its boundaries as is remains and continues. We can still operate our buildings in a cost-mindful manner. We can still do the things we're doing right now. If it doesn't pass, we run into a situation where, because of the timing of the elections and because of the timing of the funding, we would use fund balance to pay for the next school year, so the 2019-2020 school year. We'd use fund balance for that. After that, our fund balance would not be sufficient to continue or to have another school year. So, if the referendum fails, the school board will take action to dissolve or break up the district using one of the legislative methods that we can. We don't have an option because of the timing of elections. We can't ask again in November because there isn't a general November election. And you may remember that during the last budget session, the governor put in place, or the legislature and the governor put in place, a situation where operational or financial referendum for school districts cannot be held when there's no general election. Well, the timing of that is such that there's no general election in November. The dissolution legislation and the rules that we would have to follow state that the decision by the School District Boundary Appeal Board, which is the arbiter of the situation, has to make their decision before January 15th of the following year. The next election won't be till February. So effectively, we get one chance at asking this question, and without that, the school district will follow dissolution proceedings. In a situation where dissolution would occur, we have no idea, because we don't have a seat at the table, how it would end up. The School District Boundary Appeal Board is made up of 7 members, 3 from large school districts, 3 from small school districts, and 1 member of DPI. They set the rules, they are the final decision makers. They can say the entire district goes to District X. They can say we're going to cut the boundaries according to this line, that line, or what have you. They do everything. If once the dissolution paperwork is turned in, we basically turn over everything and they make the final decisions. Okay? The first several slides on page, beginning with numbers 12 and so on, state just where our revenue limit is. You'll see that our revenue limit currently, $9,672. That is $100 more than it was 10 years ago. So if we think of all of our expenses at home, it's difficult to find an expense that hasn't gone up more than $100 over the last 10 years. Our funding is tied strictly to that number, and we don't have any opportunity to raise beyond that without a referendum passage. My slide with the map on it, and I see Mrs. Bradford's got it here, it didn't turn out really well. What this is a summary of districts around us, so just to kind of show that we're not alone in needing to seek revenue limit, operational referendum. So right now, in the group of districts that we're in, ourselves and East Troy are the only 2 districts that don't have an operational referendum in place. All the other districts have one of various sizes, shapes, and years in place to fund their schools. From the expense side, we treat our school district just like we do our own homes. We need to control expenses where we can. We need to look at year-over-year expenses. We need to keep them as contained as possible. We're here saying we've had decreasing enrollment. We know that. So in turn, we've cut staff. We've decreased operations and programs to meet that same decrease. So from the elementary level alone, over the last 6 years, we've decreased 11.5 full-time positions. Now that doesn't mean that we've become a failing school. It doesn't mean we don't have offerings for our students. Because the most recent school district report card that came out still lists us as a 4-star school district. So there's all sorts of components that go into that, but that makes us compare favorably to all the districts around us. We fit right in, just where we're supposed to. So those slides, again, just going through, we're showing the different ways that we've cut, from consolidating bus routes, reducing utility spending, even just simply kicking the can down the road on a couple of items as far as maintenance has gone. We understand where our budget was. We needed to postpone some things. Another thing that we've done to show just financial correctness is we've repaid the debts that we have. So there's long-term debt, which is referendum debt. We also had short-term debt that was used to help fund balance and cover costs. Over the last 4 years, we've paid back $1 million in that debt. There's still $600,000 remaining. But we've paid back $1 million to make sure that we're not paying interest on money that we could pay back and we don't need. One thing that we run into, and that's on slide 25, we do have open enrollment. Open enrollment is when students live in the Palmyra Eagles area school district and they choose to go to school elsewhere. I have no qualms about people making those choices, but they do have impacts to our finances. So right now, we bring in approximately $9,600 per student, so that's how much we're funded. For a regular education student, we give out $7,379 of that. For a student with disabilities, we give out $12,000. So we bring in $9,600, but if a student even has speech therapy 1 day a week for 1 hour a week, we spend out $12,431. So that comes out right out of the general budget. School district budget does show a fund balance, and I apologize, I'm not up on my municipality. I don't know if you have that too. Fund balance is basically our version of the checking account, what we have to carry. Our school district audits keep us in the 20 to 25% range right now. We audit in, and we just got an audit back that was a successful and clean audit. We came back at 20.9% of our fund balance, or 20.9% in our fund balance, which is effectively how and why we would be able to fund 1 more year of school if we need to. For the overall budget of this current year, the 2018-19 school year, we walked into that budget with a nearly $1 million deficit. By changing insurance deductibles, we deleted and changed maintenance projects, eliminated more positions, reduced an employee raise that was budgeted for, and then we had to fill in for the fund balance. We did cover that $1 million balance. However, as decreasing enrollment continues, that generation of income just continues to be slower and slower, and we're running into another gap. For the projection that we're going into, we're expecting our revenues to decrease by $657,000. Our expenses are going to continue to go up, and this year we have run out of time on many of those maintenance projects. That's going to add about $600,000 onto the bill. One of the projects we have that just needs to be done, the largest rooftop in the district right now is it was put on when I was in school 25 years ago, needs to be redone. So that's a $325,000 fix just for that rooftop alone. So overall, going into this current budget, we're expecting a need of nearly $1.75 million. So if we look at page 29, we see that fund balance starting at just over 2.6 million, with the projected deficit 1.7 million, takes us down to a fund balance 948,000 to go into the following year, but another projected budget of 2.1 million coming in front of us. There's effectively no way to pay that bill, and we can't, as a public entity, go into a budget year knowing that we'll default. So, talking about cuts, let's look at some of those that we could make. We've detailed out in short some of the cuts that we've made. Look at the biggest, easiest one that you could have, close an elementary building. And we wouldn't pick favorites, talking Eagle or Palmyra. The same number is basically generated, which eliminates $630,000 of expenses a year, gross. From there, every village student needs to be bused. Each bus route costs us approximately $50,000. 2 bus routes added back in for expense, that brings us back $100,000. So now we're at a savings of $530,000. And now we're getting into net savings. The next problem that we'd have to consider is open enrollment. If a student now no longer can come to school in this area, doesn't want to take a bus ride from Eagle to Palmyra, doesn't want to take a bus ride from Palmyra to Eagle, and we incur more open enrollment, for every student we lose, that's another $7,000 or $7,500 in expenses that we incur. So, if only 50 students leave the district, that adds another $375,000 back onto the expenses. which then takes, so if we would close a building and assume, and we went with that 50 number strictly based on looking at a neighboring district, that's Delavan Darien. They closed Darien Elementary, and within weeks, they had 50 new applications for open enrollment, just that fast. There is an impact on families having a school in the area for an area like Delavan Darien, and we believe the same here. So that's why we've generated this scenario. That means that if we would close a district and incur losses of enrollment, we may go from 1.75, and even with closing a building, our most major our most major expense savings, we might go from 1.75 to 1.6 million in savings, or in deficit. So we're still $1.6 million short. Now, one of the things a question that was raised, and you'll see on slide 37, I was asked to make a comparison between if we assume that 50 student open enrollment could happen. If it doesn't happen, what would happen then? If we don't lose any more students to open enrollment and we would close that building, we still don't have enough money left. We still spend down more than would cover the next year. We don't have enough left in the revenue or in the fund balance to cover another year. Another one, and we all sit here, talk about athletics. How important are athletics? What kind of education does it provide? What does it do? What does it bring in? Right now, we have a $250,000 a year expense for athletic programs. But if 1/4 of just our student athletes leave the school district because they can't play football, they can't play baseball, they can't run track, 1/4 of just the student athletes, not the student body, just the student athletes, we bring that net savings of $250,000 down to zero because of the losses in open enrollment. This is, and I see you shaking your head, it's different than, and it was a perfect example of what you said, that when you were talking about plowing snow and laying down salt. If someone is upset because you didn't leave salt down in their neighborhood, and they leave, the rooftop is still there, their house is still worth X number to the town. If we do something wrong and irritate a family, or don't offer a program and they leave, there's nowhere else to make that up. And I'll tell an example, my neighbor, years ago when we moved in, stopped by, where do you go to school? Oh, we take our kids somewhere else. Okay, how come? Well, during my daughter's first year of school, she had a kind of a bad experience with the kindergarten teacher. We just didn't like it. That's fair. Problem is they had 6 more kids. So if you take 7 kids times $9,000 a year, times 12 years, they could pay for a whole rooftop. Just because of one bad experience with one teacher 25 years ago. That's the problem in the game that we have to play in how the numbers work versus how municipalities can do it. So, looking at why did we not hear about this? You guys all live in the town, you've all got your ears to the ground. How did this just come up now? Well, we've been working these budgets through, and as we said, we walked into last year and made $1 million worth of cuts and savings to keep things going. We didn't want to go to the community and say, Mr. Caw, we really need you to vote yes because we'd like the teachers' insurance deductibles to stay low. That's not the way we need to operate. We've made our cuts, we've made our things, we've done everything we can to make sure the community understands we've done our part. And we've worked hard to do that, and in turn, there was really no flag to fly about this. There was no scaring, there was no concern. We were doing okay, and now we've reached a point where unfortunately we're not. Isn't dissolution, isn't that kind of a nuclear option? There's got to be a better way to do it. Well, in a school district setup, there's really no way to have a divorce without a complete dissolution. There's no way to do that without creating winners and losers. We ran into this, many of you may have come across the annexation paperwork from several years ago. If that would have gone through and the portion wished to be annexed would have been by another school district, the Palmyra Eagle Area School District would have had to write a check to a much larger school district for anywhere from $4 to $7 million just because of how the territory was broken up, and because of where the buildings are, and the buildings weren't being taken out, and how the assets are determined. So there isn't a way to make this happen without creating a major burden on those left behind. And that's why we have to kind of look at this from an all or none perspective. The cost of it. For every $100,000 in tax value, on year one, it would add $125 to your current tax bill for year one. For year two, you add an additional $91, so $216 total per $100,000 of home value. For year three, add $39 more, so that's $255 total. Year four, $40 more, so $295 total. From years 5 on, you add 0 more, but it stays at the $295 per 100,000. So if you have a $300,000 house, that's $885 per year that the passage of this referendum would add to the tax bill. If the tax, so that's the tax impact if it passes. What's the tax impact if it fails? We can look at you honestly and say, we have no idea. It would totally depend on the district that the properties would be assigned to. We have no control or no say in it. We don't know, and we would only be foolish to make any guesses. There is $14.2 million in debt remaining on our district. That's long-term debt. That would be put into an asset and debt calculation, and that too would be dispersed amongst any district that takes on the properties. Okay? So, if the referendum were to pass, the district remains open, buildings are repaired and maintained, and our communities continue to have their own school district. If it fails, there's 750 students in the Palmyra Eagle Area School District that would be displaced. One of the largest employers, over 100 employees, would be out of business, and communities may still retain buildings that would be unused or vacant. And they would be owned then by whatever district takes over the area, or whatever district they are assigned to. The referendum is first stated to be February 19th. We are waiting to hear if there's going to be a statewide primary that day. If there is, the referendum will be held that day. If there is no statewide election, the referendum moves then to April 2nd. It will be no later than April 2nd, period. Some questions that have come up. Is this a scare tactic? Are we just trying to pull the wool over your eyes? I promise you, and you laughed about not wanting to sit here for 2.5 hours. I promise you that my wife and children would rather have me home tonight than here or running other meetings or doing other things. Your time, and we all live in these communities. We're not pulling any punches. The books are open. Anybody's free to look at anything they want. The same numbers will come out of it. Why not just simply increase student-to-teacher ratio? Why not just put more kids in a classroom? Well, if we take some of our elementary levels, most of our elementary levels in Palmyra and all of our elementary levels in Eagle, there's only one section. So there's 14 kids in my son's second grade class in Eagle, because there's only 14 second graders. There are no more. So if we combine a split class, make a first and second grade class, and now there would be 28 kids of first and second grade together, that would save us $50,000 as a rough number on salary and benefits for one teacher. But we go back to open enrollment. If four students or 4 families don't like being in a split class and leave, we're now back to 0 again. All of our savings is now gone. The dissolution timing was brought into question. We verified for a second and third time with DPI. What would happen is our board would file paperwork with DPI and the School District Boundary Appeal Board prior to June 30th of 2019. They then take over the entire process. That happens from July 1st, and then they must make their decision by law prior to January 15th of 2020. And whatever decision they make goes into effect. Our fiscal year begins on July 1 of that year, 2020. As I said before, are we doing this because we're a failing or a bad school district? Absolutely not. We do measure up with all local districts. We're smaller than they are. Nobody's going to deny that. But the measurables are there. We're doing the things we're supposed to do. We've got excellent staff. We've got good families. We're a good school. Is enrollment declining in other places? Yes. Over half of the districts statewide are experiencing this same issue. Declining enrollment is everywhere. I was at a school board meeting a couple of weeks ago with a gentleman from Lake Geneva who's been on school boards for 45 years. And his quote was, the economy of the mid to late 2000s basically eliminated half of a population educated. People just simply stopped having kids because they couldn't afford them anymore. We're now experiencing that issue. And as we roll back the clock on the referendum that was passed, so in 2003, the high school, middle school was remodeled because frankly it was bursting at the seams. It was packed. 7, 8 years later, we hit declining enrollment. So now we've got a beautiful building with plenty of space for high schoolers and not enough to put in. Lastly, is this decision or is this situation the result of poor fiscal management? Absolutely not. Our district is audited. The books are looked at by an outside audit firm every year. There is no, we didn't forget to carry a 1. We didn't make some great error. The numbers are what the numbers are. All right? So I appreciate you listening. Thank you for your time. I am happy to answer any questions that you have. We'll be having another forum, if that's okay with you, otherwise
No,
I'm happy to do.
that's okay. I was just gonna mention that 25 years ago at St. Mary's Church,
Yeah.
here in Pilar I went, there were 6 catechism classes.
Right.
Now there are 3 children
Right.
in the catechism system, and they
Right.
go up to Salt, and they don't even have, it went from 6 classes to 3 children in 25 years.
When I was a kid and I used to go down and Martha Parker taught me to bowl, and we used to have leagues every night, and there were 20 kids in each league. Now we have 1 league on Saturday mornings, and there's 20 kids, period. It is just the nature of the population right now. Now, we have the coupling effect of open enrollment and declining enrollment, and that's kind of landed us where we are.
I have one more question.
Yes, sir.
If the taxes go up $100 per taxpayer the first year?
125 per 100,000.
Oh, 125 per 100,000, and then 92?
And then 92 additional. So it goes up to 216 for the second year.
Okay, so it's 125 the first year.
Here, let me get it.
Oh, it's in here.
Yeah, it's right in there.
Okay, all right,
Yeah.
okay. Here, I got one over
Yeah, yep, it's right in there.
there. Okay.
What is, are you having a net loss or gain with open enrollment?
We have a net loss of approximately 320 students a year.
A year?
A year. Not additional, but just yearly, out of our 950 students, 300 are open enroll out. We bring in 40-something back from other districts. So we do have a net loss of around 300.
25%,
About 30%.
30%.
Yep.
He wasn't a math major.
That's okay. I'm a pharmacist, I
I
only
can,
count to
I
30.
can, I can add, I can add up to 10.
Yeah, that's fine, that's fine. Like I said, I can only count to 30, we're all.
Anyone have questions?
I have one question.
Yes, sir.
You stated that the physical property
Yes, sir.
is owned by the district now,
Yes, sir.
but if you do not go ahead and support the referendum as a positive, to go ahead with it,
Correct.
and it goes negative,
Yes.
then that property becomes the ownership of some other school district?
So that property, so think of it this way. Think of it as the inheritance of a family, all right? So when it's time to inherit, everything goes into a pot. take all the assets of the district, and basically they would walk through the buildings and inventory everything that we have, including the buildings themselves, the structures themselves. Then they would take all the debt, $14.2 million in long-term debt. They lump that into the same pot, and then they divvy it up. Now, one of the great questions comes in, how much is a school building worth? I had somebody write me an email, how much is your property worth? Well, I don't know how many school buildings sell and what they go for. In a school like the buildings that we have, I don't know what other uses there are, I don't know who would be interested, I don't know, there's no value set on them right now. They would be divvied up in the dissolution process and then become property of whatever school district they are assigned to by the school district boundary appeal board.
So this other district that the property goes to,
Yes, sir.
they and then, in effect, they get ownership of it
Correct.
as collateral for taking the kids, sort of.
And taking the debt.
More or
And they
less,
get
yes.
the debt with
And
it,
they get the debt
which-
with it. Correct. Correct. And from a,
And the village gets nothing,
because it's not the village's property, correct. It's
Nor the
school
town.
district, nor the town's, correct. But
okay?
it's-
Just to make sure I understand that.
But our two, so I checked, the two parcels that are in Palmyra, there's 80 acres, they're basically two 40-acre parcels. And in Eagle, it's a 40-acre parcel. 80 acres here, 40 acres there. Right in the heart of the village, right in the heart of, well, both villages. That would be property of other people, another place,
Another district.
another district. And they then have the right to decide to do whatever they so choose.
And we would continue to pay for it.
You would be the taxpayer of whatever district you are assigned. So you can build any imagination scenario you want. If Mrs. Bratz's house, and she lives right down the street from my parents, if they get assigned to Jefferson and the village gets assigned to Whitewater, and again, just, I know I'm on camera, just speculation, this is just speculation. If they're assigned to different places, that debt number is all built into the equation from the school district boundary appeal board, and you would be paying for, or you would have ownership of the building and she would not. But there is no, as far as representation on the board, those boards would have to, whoever the area would be assigned to, may or may not have any representation from the area until the next election, unless someone were assigned to that board. So right now, there are 7 people on the school board, 5 of whom went to school here, 7 of whom, all 7 of us have kids in school in each of the buildings. You have as much local control as possible. In that situation, you don't have any, because you don't, there is a group of people in charge of the buildings that now is in charge of your district. So you have local control, but you're part of a different local. Yes, sir.
I'm gonna clarify one more thing.
Yes, please.
At this point in time, 30% of potential students here are going somewhere else.
Yes, sir.
Has any sort of a exit interview or any kind of a survey been taken
Yes.
to determine what the reasons are for that? Is there a consistent reason? That's one question.
Yes.
Second one is if they go somewhere else
Yes.
and now we decide they don't like the new program because we keep cutting things, cutting costs, we're gonna stay open.
Right.
And now we're gonna get another percentage, maybe another 10% somewhere else. Do we have any way to project that cost so we can compare the cost of passing the referendum to the cost of not passing it?
Sure. So we'll go back to the first one. As students leave, we do try to contact the families. We've had answers from programming to I didn't like the teacher, to you don't offer the right sport, to I simply just drive that way to go to work and that's where I want my kids, to I want a bigger school versus a smaller school. So in short, soup to nuts. We have taken concerns that we can do things about, such as programming or the quality of programming. We've dedicated 5 years of effort since I've become part of the school board to increase and solidify our curriculum, to do a better job where we need to do it, to make sure we're building a really good mousetrap, to make sure that our families and our students are getting educated like they deserve to be. And they were before, and we've increased and improved from there. So we've done the things that we can. I still can't make us look bigger than we are. I can't offer lacrosse or build a swimming pool. It just won't happen here. We still are part of a small town.
And your revenue is determined by the number of kids coming to school.
Our revenue is determined by the number of students that live within the district, and then an expense is when those students leave. So the revenue, we literally, and I know everybody got their tax bill, we literally have no control over what that number is set at. The state sets the revenue limit. The count is, as far as pupil or heads go, the count is what the count is. So that number, that incoming number, we have little to no control over. The expense side is the only thing that we have kind of access to. That's what we can work on. Your other question, is it, all we can do is build projections as to what will happen. Part of the projection, and as I said, if this were to go down, and we can say, on one side, you'll lose more kids, and we wouldn't have enough money to make it, and on the other side, we'll say we didn't lose any more kids, and we still won't have enough money to make it. Both scenarios are the same. I have been told by any number of, so think of the 6th graders and the 8th graders who are going into transition years next year. They're going to middle school or they're going to high school. I've been told by a number of people who firmly support our district, who are longstanding supporters of what we do, that said, you know, if they vote no, we know the handwriting is on the wall. We're gonna leave because we want them to start high school somewhere else. We don't want them to have to start here and then move somewhere else. And I don't blame anybody. This is not, unfortunately, this is going to take on a bit of a life of its own. My job is simply, here's the information that we can come up with to give you as voters the best thing to think about. There is no, this is as pure of democracy as you can come up with, because effectively your vote will determine what's going to happen. This isn't about you choosing someone to be on a board to make that choice. This is effectively, every vote that you make counts in what's going to happen, because there's really only 2 options in front of us. Yes, and we continue, no, and we do not. It's really, it's not an ultimatum, it's not meant to be scary, but it is kind of the facts of the situation.
So if you vote no, there's no guarantee it's gonna be cheaper for the people here.
If you vote no, it could be more, it could be less. There are all sorts of people floating all sorts of scenarios, and again, being truthful and prudent about it, nobody knows.
I don't look at it as people, I'm looking at it as a numbers thing.
Correct.
And it's, you know, if I controlled the stock or I was gonna buy it, I'd wanna have answers to those questions.
Right.
And I think that's kind of the position we're in.
Correct. And unfortunately, the only thing that I can say for sure is, if it passes, the amount of you will spend on the referendum amount, that's the only for sure that comes into play. It's the only for sure that we have. Everything else is pure speculation. And as I said, our meeting the other night, the presentation went on for 2.5 hours, and I was asked that same question no short of 10 times. They kept wanting me to come up with a different answer, but it's always the same answer. We don't know. And we can't know because this has never happened before. There's no precedent on the books. The rules that are in place were designed after the last dissolution, which occurred in the early 80s, and that's when they wrote these laws, because they didn't have any laws before that. These laws have been started, so the process has begun, and then referendums were passed, so they stopped the dissolution. In our case, as we laid out, we don't have another chance to ask this question. This is it.
I think your presentation was excellent, and I'm kind of confirming what I read.
Sure.
And you're agreeing with what I could see when I read it.
Right, I wrote it.
Yeah. Yeah, that I knew.
Yeah, so.
But I guess the point is,
Most of it was written in my jammies in my basement.
I've been there.
Yeah.
do you say to, say, an older resident
Mhm.
that has no kids, no ties to it?
Sure.
What do you say to convince them that it would be a good way to go forward to keep the district? What is the importance of the district to the town and the village?
And if I could interrupt, he's not saying yes or no.
No, I know
He's
that.
presenting the options because he has to be middle ground as a school district.
No, I understand that.
Right.
I understand that. I'm just,
Nobody on the school board can promote yes, or promote no.
well, you have to give
So,
reasons.
right, so as a school board member, we don't know what the numbers are.
And
going to
obviously,
be.
you don't want the school to go away.
I wouldn't be